pictures like it.
And I'm glad that when I came back from Los Angeles in July of 1997, everything, I'd been ramping my mind for about 2 years to finish the climax of this movie when 4 characters, 4 different emotions come together: anger, pride, love, and grief. And when they come together, they fit like pieces of a puzzle, and then they solve this, the dilemma of the supernatural presence, which is that they see their own selves in the mirror rather than a distortion of who they are or who they've become. And based on the revelations of the supernatural presence, they all take a step for the better. They all see the person that they've become inside the mirror, who they truly are inside, and they take a step towards a better life. A small step, but it's a change that will alter their lives. Based on that, I had 4 different people running around inside my head, and this wall is the only way to get it out. Essentially what I did is I just started throwing pieces of paper up and covered the wall, and figured that at some point I'd fill out each one of these pieces of paper up with what I wanted them to say, with what I wanted the characters to, how their puzzle pieces interconnected in order to form a string of pearls that takes them through and gets them outside of the House of Mirrors. So essentially what happens though is that they come in through here, and then they go around, and the funny thing was is that I just started like throwing this stuff down, but I would always make sure that I would have to flow outside of the page. It's like you can never stay stuck on the same page. You have to move from one to the next. And pretty soon it's like, I just thought, oh, this kind of goes in this area. Or this right here, I'd say, when I wanted to talk about redemption, oh, I'll put redemption up here, and then everything that kind of trickled forth came through, and you could see by the colors that it's like redemption was green. And so the green followed through here, and then it turned over to yellow, and the yellows came across here, and it turned back to a pink or to a red, came down and around and out and down. And if you see here, that's kind of like a wrap-up of what I started off with. You start with the supernatural presence, then you go through all these different colors, or like we have different colors of our emotions. Different colors have different flows, and you have to follow that flow, but eventually you want to come back to the emotion or to the color that you started with. And so by the time that they get their way through the House of Mirrors, you start with the supernatural presence, and then over here you end with the supernatural presence, and with the main theme of the entire movie being intervention. That this supernatural presence intervenes in people's lives, not when they want it, but only when they need it. Only when they need to make a change or to see a sign, which is the way that a lot of people act in the world. People act like slingshots. They'll say something and they'll slingshot you off into some other direction. They won't see the change, but someone else, a third body who wasn't there, will see the change, because the person who got slingshot, he starts behaving differently than everyone else has seen them. But based on that one encounter, which my old partner, Tracy Kawamura, mentioned, she called it intervention, and that was the word that kind of stuck. I think to name it, or just to call it intervention, it's almost corny in a way, but it's like serendipity or synchronicity, or when people just come into your lives at weird times, and then people say, wow, that was a weird coincidence, or that was a lucky. Well, it's like, maybe it's not luck, maybe it's preparation meets opportunity, and that's what as the saying goes. What else can I say about this wall? Well, this is probably the most intense part right here. So I'm going to take this off. This is the cliff edge right here. There's one part when I was in Los Angeles. A lot of this movie is about losing my true love, and I guess that ever since I've been sleepless in Seattle over it. And one of the biggest things that, one of the biggest stories is the story of grief, and how after losing the true love of your life, how you have to let go at some point in order to live again, in order to become made again. And based on a supernatural experience, or a supernatural storm that I had in July of '97 here in Seattle, I said one thing. I said to a friend of mine who had just gone through, his girlfriend dumped him, and he was crying, and he was really sad and in the dumps. And I said, you know, Bobby, there's one thing that we both have to do that the main character does in the movie. And he asked me, well, what's that? He says he lets go. And all of a sudden, it had been sunny for days and days. This flash storm came up off the horizon, and as soon as I said he lets go, and we just looked at each other. It was the loudest thunder crack that we'd heard all year. And this guy had been living in Seattle for about 3 years, and he said that he never recalled a storm so violent or so loud or so quick, because it only had 2 thunder cracks. And the second thunder crack was after I said, well, I better get going. It looks like it's going to storm. I go, but remember, Bobby, the thing is that he gets made again by letting go. And then, now that, I mean, you know, you look up and you just, it's like you don't know what to make of it. But that got put into my movie because at the time, I was like on the edge. I was on the cliff edge that Hank is on, inside of myself. And I have reds and blues that are coming out of him, like the reds and blues of our emotions. And when he lets go of her spirit, he's going to let her go right into the eyes of the camera. And he has to in order to live again. And that moment, once he does, it's going to be BAM! And I hope to shock the audience, but that's also going to be the major crescendo. And as it turns out, that's what, by going through, if you kind of follow the flow of water takes you out and over down here. And that's, I guess, I needed some way in my mind to be able to follow where I was at inside the House of Mirrors, because it's easy to get lost in a House of Mirrors, and to find your way out elegantly, that was my trick. And in order to say all the things so all the characters interlock just right, this is like throwing paint against a wall. Instead of, I consider it kind of like magnetic poetry. You throw all this stuff together and then you start like rearranging the pieces of paper to make it say it in the way that you want it. And essentially what I did is I just started throwing all the things onto the pieces of paper, and pretty soon, after a while, I guess I was never one who colored inside the lines. But so as you can see, this is what got me going. This is what allowed me to sort it all out. And here's my friend Ndugu. This is my drumming teacher, Ndugu Chancellor. He grew up in Watts, California, which is essentially the jungle. And he pulled himself out of the jungle with 2 sticks in practice, a lot of practice, and became a world-class drummer. The day that I left Los Angeles, when I started this entire journey 2.5 years ago, on July 31st of 1995, Ndugu told me one thing. I said, you know, Ndugu, I feel like I'm in the Shawshank Redemption, where he just jumps inside the sewer pipe and starts going for it, not knowing if he's going in the right direction or if he's ever going to reach the end of that sewer pipe. And he tells me, just think though, once he makes it through, he lands up in one place. Paradise. And that's what sent me on my way. And based on that, I've gone through hell, I've gotten almost stabbed, I've gotten arrested, beaten up, kicked, lost all my friends at one point or another. So everyone has said that they couldn't believe that this is true. But this is all true. I mean, this is all real. And it makes sense. When I take and explain it to actors or actresses or directors and studio executives, I hope that they'll see that there's an order to all this chaos. I mean, you could see it by the red boundaries. It's like it had to flow through and around, and you can see though that with the boundaries, you know where you are, you know where you stand, and that's one of the themes of the movie, as a matter of fact. So this is all inspired by a dream, by a place where I used to live back when I was in Highland and Warren. As a matter of fact, I wrote a letter to my father today, sitting atop a hill on Highland, Warren, and Queen Anne, on a house that looks haunted. And which is kind of the way that I grew up, and that's kind of where all this got started. I was living in Highland, my dad was living in Warren, And the house that we were living in actually we had experiences there that I can't explain, but that somebody independently asked us, who lived there afterwards, if we had had the same experiences as they did. And that was kind of what set this entire thing in motion, was that I had somebody confirm, independently verify, or ask, have you had the same experiences here in the same location? And at that point, it took on a reality for me, that I'm not crazy, that everything growing up that I just thought was a reality, but then you go out into the real world and find out it's not such a reality. It's, people don't believe in that. But if you see it, and if you believe it, and then if somebody else comes up to you and independently offers it, that's what all this is about. So, today I wrote a letter to my dad. I hope that he receives it with the spirit in which it was written in from Highland and Warren. I hope that people get a chance to go up there on Queen Anne and take a look at the view of the city, because when I look down upon the city from that part, you don't have any distractions, any wires, any lines. It's just a beautiful view of Seattle. And it's like peace and serenity. And it's a city that I finally feel like I've conquered in some way. That it didn't get the best of me, that I learned the best from it. And I'm glad that Seattle was the place where I landed in order to finish the script, which I believe will be someday known as my masterpiece. I just hope that someday this wall gets preserved, and that the equity management company doesn't throw me out and evict me and paint over all this, which they can do, and I think that they would do for money in order to sell this place for more. And then where would all the birdies outside go? I feed all the birdies, and I have a regular bird poopapalooza outside. But where would all they go? Where would they go? I don't know. But so that's a little story behind the wall. It took me an entire month to finish it, the month of July 97. And if you turn your camera this way, right here, you'll see that it became, that this is the wall in which it all became. What I essentially did is, if you look at these up here, these 4 pages right here are the wall that you were just looking at. What I did is, on each of those little colored sheets of paper, I would put room 1, and I would summarize what that room stood for. That I draw all 4 together, and that the pager then sets off the encounter. I reveal the entity in room number 2. In room number 3, the entity disappears. And with each one of these, I was able to summarize in 4 pages that I could look at easily and digest them, rather than having to digest that entire wall. And from these 4 pages, that became the rest of the House of Mirrors. And this is, as you can see, there are many copies behind each one of these. So the way that I worked on this was I just threw it all out of my head, and then I could look at it at different sections. And with it was kind of nice having it in 3 different groups, because you get 3 different acts. It's almost like a stage play to me. And that the characters are all, you go to all these different rooms, but they're rooms of their mind. They all stay in the same location. And within that talk, you have 3 small acts that I hope someday become a stage play. The people improvising their feelings based on the actors' synergy and what they feel about synchronicity or intervention, or what other people have, because they can contribute a verse based on the directions in which we go within inside here. Now, essentially it goes from 1, 2, and then 3, and as it comes up, we start, this is where the characters kind of sort themselves out, and this last row right here is where they start sorting out the entity, or the supernatural presence. And as you can see, they kind of, they come along, and then it switches from a regular point of view to the entity's point of view, so that the characters are looking into the eyes of the supernatural presence. And as Hank starts to come up, he lets go of Maddie, his one true love, and bam! The supernatural storm hits, and crescendos. And so this is where that wall there became this wall here in August and September, and from there I just polished the rest of the thing in October. And now Distortions is ready to go to Spielberg, Katzenberg, and Geffen. There we have it.